Welcome to the fifth annual Patricia Ismond Literary Workshop, which is, in fact, the last event slated for the Nobel laureates on the Nobel laureates calendar of activities for the year 2021. My name is Sigifani Bryan, and I am the Acting Outreach and Marketing Officer at the UWI Open Campus St. Lucia. But before we delve into our very exciting agenda, I would like to open up our session with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather this evening, I pray that you bless our presenters so that they may present in the best way possible, and also to the students, just help them relax so that they may be open to the information that is presented to them. Please bless everyone in this room and those who are joining us far and wide so that everything can run smoothly. In your name we pray, amen. So now that we've asked the Lord for his blessings on this session, I now introduce you to Mrs. Leslie Crane Mitchell. She is our acting head at UWI Open Campus St. Lucia, and she will offer her warm welcome remarks. Mrs. Mitchell. Your mic is muted, Mrs. Mitchell.
Sorry about that. A warm welcome to everyone here joining us this evening. A special welcome to our facilitator, Dr. MacDonald, and to our poets for the evening, Mr. John Robert Lee and Miss Catherine Atkinson. And of course, we welcome you, our participants, and our wider audience. This evening, I have the honor to introduce you to Dr. Patricia Ismond, an unsung St. Lucian icon in whose memory we gather here this evening. This workshop is not only our contribution to the Nobel Laureate Festival 2021, but a deliberate effort to honor the memory of the late Dr. Ismond for her sterling academic contributions to the region and generous posthumous contributions to the UWI Open Campus and to St. Lucia. Dr. Ismond is a daughter of the soil, born in Mico in 1944 to Elise Ismond and Caesar Cooper. After her primary school years, she attended St. Joseph's Convent and would later teach there before proceeding on an island scholarship to the University of the West Indies, from which she graduated with honors in 1968. It was there that she developed her now legendary passion for literature and for the arts. She returned to St. Lucia in 1968 to teach for a year before going to UWI Mona in 1969 to pursue a master's degree on a UWI postgraduate scholarship. It wasn't long before she received the 1970 Commonwealth Scholarship, which enabled her to travel to the UK, where she studied for her PhD at the University of Kent at Canterbury. Her doctoral thesis was entitled Derek Walcott, The Development of Rooted Vision, Poetry and Drama, and was completed in 1974. Dr. Ismond would once again join the University of the West Indies, this time at its St. Augustine campus as an assistant lecturer in 1973. In 1975, she became a lecturer in English on that campus. She spent 30 faithful years with the University of the West Indies, during which time she headed the Department of English Literature. During her tenure as head of department and with her drive and resolve, the Center for Creative Festival Arts was established, and that was in 1986. And this center has now become the main training center for aspiring artists from St. Lucia and the Eastern Caribbean. In 1983, Dr. Ismond obtained a Fulbright Lassos Fellowship, where she was attached to the drama department of Carnegie Mellon University in the US. She became senior lecturer in English at UWI in 1988 and was visiting associate lecturer of English at Stanford University from 1988 to 1989. Dr. Ismond published widely and often. She published many articles and papers on Caribbean literature, especially on her beloved St. Lucian poet, Derek Walcott. In 2001, her work was crowned with the publication by the UWI Press of her book entitled Abandoning Dead Metaphors, The Caribbean Phase of Derek Walcott's Poetry. Widely regarded as a leading authority on the work of Derek Walcott, her book is recognized as a seminal study of the work of our second Nobel laureate, and it is available on Amazon. Sadly, Dr. Ismond died on June 27, 2006, after a hard-fought battle with multiple myeloma. Subsequently, in recognition of her love and dedication to the UE and to her country, St. Lucia, Professor Ismond's entire collection of work produced over several decades, as well as her personal library, was donated by her sister Hester to the UWI Open Campus St. Lucia. That was in 2009. 3 years later, the UWI Open Campus St. Lucia was privileged to host a gathering of friends to witness the handing over of a $50,000 donation to the then Vice Chancellor, Professor E. Nigel Harris, on behalf of the deceased Professor Ismond. The check, which was presented by her loving sister Hester, was used to create the Patricia Ismond Scholarship Fund, a revolving scholarship for St. Lucian students wishing to pursue literature or literary studies at the University of the West Indies. The scholarship, which matured in 2014, has to date funded 3 students from the UWI Open Campus. Dr. Ismond's entire collection of over 1,000 books, notes, and other writings is currently held in the Special Collections section of the UE Open Campus St. Lucia Library and is available upon request to students, in particular those focusing on the work of Derek Walcott. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mitchell, for giving us such detailed information on the late Dr. Patricia Ismond and how we came about to more or less host this annual workshop. With that being said, we now move on to the introduction of our moderator as well as our poets or presenters. Our moderator or facilitator for this evening is Dr. Antonia MacDonald. She's a former lecturer at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College and a current professor of English literature, as well as an associate dean in the School of Arts and Sciences, and that is at the St. George's University in Grenada. She is committed to empowering through education. Dr. MacDonald has been very active in the development of academic programs that offer quality instruction and that respond to local, regional, as well as international educational needs. She is currently working on the development of postgraduate programs that, through interdisciplinary initiatives with other regional and international universities, will increase educational opportunities in the Eastern Caribbean. Dr. MacDonald has also written extensively on the literatures of Caribbean women. We also have Mr. John Robert Lee. He is a St. Lucian writer who has published several collections of poetry. His short stories, poems, essays, and reviews can be found in many journals, both in print and online. And this includes newspapers and international anthologies. He has edited several literature anthologies and bibliographies of St. Lucian and Caribbean literature. Our second poet or presenter for this evening is Miss Catherine Atkinson. Miss Atkinson is a writer, a teacher, a television personality, and a publisher of Fresh Magazine. Her articles have appeared in She Magazine, Mako Magazine, Caribbean Beat, Live Mint Lounge, and Island Life. She hosts the cooking program Stir It Up and recently co-authored Living My Dreams, the biography of sports personality Joseph Reds Pereira. Ms. Atkinson is a certified teacher, and she is currently a graduate student at UBC in the MFA Writing Program in Canada. With that being said, I now hand our virtual lectern to our facilitator for this evening, who is Dr. Antonia MacDonald.
Thank you, Sigifani.
You
Good night, everybody. A warm, warm welcome to this virtual event. And I have to begin by saying that it's a mixed thing. I have so looked forward to seeing you every year, to coming to St. Lucia and to interacting with the students. It has always been my pleasure to have it live and direct. But nonetheless, I am confident that in this virtual space, we will enjoy the same level of enthusiastic participation that has been the hallmark of this workshop. So, to the members of the public who are joining us tonight on other social media platforms, I want to extend a very warm welcome to you. Now, this is the first time that the workshop has been open to the public. And I am confident that in the future, we will have more engagements of this time. So tonight, in fact, we are experimenting with a dual delivery. So we have the public on one platform, we have the students in our Zoom and the teachers in our Zoom meeting. And I'm hoping that whatever successes that we enjoy tonight, we'll use them as a blueprint to map out future collaborations with my internal public, the CAPE students, and you, the external public, poetry lovers, literary enthusiasts, budding poets, senior poets, whoever you are. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, I'm going to share my screen because I wanted to, okay. So tonight, the topic that we have set up, and I have to admit, by the way, that I am not the author of the topic, but I found it deeply evocative. So Sigifani, well done. The title that I was given was called Unmasking Poetry, but I extended it to become Unmasking the Celebratory Power of Poetry, Resilience, Adaptation, Transformation. Now, really what I found useful and provocative was the use of the word mask, because mask has become a universal household name. And unmasking is not a word that we speak of with ease. In fact, in these dark days of a raging pandemic, unmasking conjures up danger, lack of protection, spread of the virus. To be unmasked is to be exposed. But it is with this notion of exposure that is what I want to run with tonight. I want us to explore what it means to be exposed. What does the act of unmasking a poem reveal? So, if we explore the notion of the poem as a mask and the act of reading and analyzing those selected poems as an unmasking, then unmasking allows you to peel away the layers of meaning that constitute the poem. And so, to extend the mask metaphor, masks come with connectors. So, students, think of the connectors in this instance as the elements of poetry, the literary devices that hold the poem in place and that by extension hold the mask in place. So it is the dismantling of the connectors that is core to this act of unmasking. Therein lies the pleasure. That is the celebratory aspect that we're going to deal with tonight. Now, very often, I'm hoping that the two poets who are here with us tonight will testify to this. But I want to propose that the act of writing is itself a form of unmasking, where the poet reveals something of his or her innermost self to the reader. This willful unmasking of self, so to speak, is what I'm going to focus on as the celebratory power. This is pleasure inducing, celebratory by virtue of this. Okay, so that is kind of, students, This is where I want you to locate yourself. All right. But I also had wanted, when I was given the topic, to extend the topic to connect back to Nobel Laureate Week, because this is really part of the activities of Nobel Laureate Week, where we're talking about celebrating excellence, challenges, uncertainty, opportunity. Now, of course, so in making the link, here you have Patricia Ismond, renowned Walcottian scholar, and now a workshop that memorializes her contribution to St. Lucian literature, connected back to Nobel Laureate Week. And so we honor now not only Sir Derek, but also Professor Ismond. And in our honoring of them, in our celebrating of them, we acknowledge that poetry, just like academic scholarship, is about negotiating challenges, wrestling with doubt and uncertainty, and seizing the opportunities that allow for adaptation and transformation. So, if we had the time tonight, we could, of course, flesh out how Professor Ismond's own biography talks about the challenges of academic life and academia. Sir Derek's story is better known. We appreciate the challenges he faced growing up in a place that he had once elsewhere referred to as a colonial backwater. We know that he lost his father at a very tender age. We know too that as a young artist, he was constantly haunted by the specter of untimely death, separating him from the realization of one's creative potential. Challenges, yes. Uncertainty, most definitely. Resilience, adaptation, and transformation, that is what constitutes the celebratory bedrock on which rests Sir Derek's monumental achievements as poet and playwright. And this will become apparent to you tonight when our poet panelists each read a poem by Sir Derek. Now, in terms of how we're going to proceed, we will have us working on, the people are going to read the poem. So first we'll have Robert Lee reading, and then he will read a poem by Derek Walcott, and then he will read a poem, his own poem. We'll have a little discussion in between. And then you, the students, you are going to go into breakout rooms and you're going to discuss the topic that I had given you earlier today. For the public, while the students are in their breakout room, you will have the opportunity to listen to poetry that is done on Derek Walcott. The poems of Derek Walcott, maybe some of them being read by him, some of them maybe being read by other people. But it's not only that you're going to be listening, we're giving you an opportunity to participate where you can then send in your questions and we will entertain your questions after the students have reported from their plenary. So that is what we're going to be doing throughout the evening. Now, students, before we get to the heart of the matter, I will, like all good teachers, the dread teachers, give you a test. And I know that you're saying, oh my God, just so already, but it's really not a test that's graded. It's a poll that will allow me to assess your connectivity, both technologically and of course, literary. So with that, I am going to launch the poll. I hope that way I will know how you are managing. So first poll launched. Okay. Students, I hope that, very good. Now you're beginning. Excellent, keep going. Well, teachers, you can also, no, teachers don't answer the poll, eh? Okay, so it's working. I'm very pleased that it's working. All right. And it's 100%. So I'm thinking I don't need any more polls. But let me try it again because I only had 16 of you. Okay. So this is the results of it. Okay. But it was only 16 of you. So I'm thinking that some of you may have had some challenges. And you know what? Use your reaction button at the bottom of the screen and use the chat feature and tell us if you are having any challenges that prevent you from using the poll. Okay? Because not everybody did it. So I want to know, what is the problem? Okay. So any students, anybody writing anything? Nobody there? All right, what I'm going to do, because time is of the essence, I'm not going to launch the other polls, but instead I'm going to move to the next part of the evening, and then later on, I'm going to launch another poll just to make sure that you are still with us. Okay, so the poll will be for like a kind of just a hello, hello, are we there? Okay, so without further ado, I am going to I'm going to ask Robert to take the stage and to read the poem. And students, you have a copy of the poem so you could follow, so we don't need to put it up on the screen. We'll read the poem now. Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Antonia, and good evening to everybody. And Antonia, if you permit me just for a moment to say, I was fortunate to know Pat Ismond in my late teens, early 20s. She was very influential in introducing me to Caribbean literature, encouraged me to go to university, was a good friend in those years, you know, as a young man when you begin to form yourself and form your ideas and so on. So it's great to be on this Pat Ismond session, as it were. I say I owe so much to her. But I'm reading now from Derek Walcott's Sea Grapes, 1976 publication. I'm reading the second part of his poem, Saintly Sea. Saintly Sea, Part 2. Pomerac, Otaheite apple, Pomsetier, pomegranate, Moubin, Zanana, the pineapple's Aztec helmet. Pom, I have forgotten what pom for the Irish potato. Cherise, the cherry, Zaman siamons by the crisp sea bursts au bord de la rivière. Come back to me, my language. Come back, Caco, Grigri, Solitaire, Ciseaux, the scissor bird. No nightingales except once in the indigo mountains of Jamaica, blue depth, deepest coffee, flicker of pimento, the shaft light on a yellow ackee, the bark alone bare. Jardin en montagne, en habitation, the wet leather reek of the hill donkey. Evening opens at a text of fireflies. In the mountain huts, tikai habitation, candles, candleflies, and the black night bending cups in its hard palms. Cool, thin water. This is important water. Important? Imported? Water is important. Also very important, the red rust drum, the evening deepest coffee, the morning powerful, important coffee. The village is shut all day in the sun. In the empty schoolyard, teacher dead today. The fruit rotting yellow on the ground, dies from Gauguin. The pomerac dies, the earth purple, the ochre road still waiting in the sun for my shadow. Oh, so you is Walcott, you is Roddy brother, teacher Alex's son. And the small rivers with important names, and the important corporal in the country station, Habitation, and looking towards the thick green slopes of cocoa. The sun that melts the asphalt at noon, and the woman in the shade of the breadfruit bent over in the lip of the valley. Below her, blue-green, the lost valleys of sugar, and the bus rides, the fields of bananas, the tanker still rusts in the lagoon at Roseau. And around what corner was uttered a single yellow leaf? From the frangipani, a tough bark, reticent, but when it flowers and delivers hard lilies, pungent, recalling Martina or Eunice or Lucilla, who comes down the steps with a cool side flow as spring water eases over shelves of rock in some green ferny hole by the road in the mountains. Her smile like the whole country, her smell earth, red-brown earth, Her armpits are reaping, her arms saplings, an old woman that she is now, with other generations of daughters flowing down the steps, Jean-bitation, Belle-Bitation, until their teeth go and all the rest. Oh, Martinas, Lucillas, I'm a wild golden apple that will burst with love of you and your men. Those I never told enough with my young poet's eyes, crazy with the country. Generations going, generations gone. Moi, c'est Jean Saint-Lucie. C'est là moi sorti. Is there that I born. Derek Walcott, St. Lucie, section 2 from Sea Grapes.
Thank you so much, Robert. And you know, I was thinking when you chose that, I was really happy that you had chosen that poem.
Mhm.
If only because I keep thinking that that poem is at the heart of sea grapes, the
Mm.
bittersweet heart of sea grapes, just
Mm.
like, and the celebratory aspect of it.
Indeed. Yes.
So I was just wondering, what were your own thoughts when you chose it?
Well, I thought as we had discussed the theme, that poem, and as you know, it is a longer poem. I just read a part 2, and it's got some famous parts in it, like the section dealing with the church mural at Jacmel. But I thought it Derek set out a celebration of St. Lucia. Its fauna, its flora, he actually names Otaheite apple and the other flowers and fruit. He celebrates the landscape also. And of course, the people, Martinas, Lucillas, the women he knew as young women, and now they're old. And he celebrates, in a sense, to go back to your theme, the unmasking, the uncovering, the unmasking, as it were, of the home culture, which Derek loved and he celebrated so often in all of his work. It is an uncovering through the poet's eye. And what I've always liked about Derek Walcott, whenever I drive around St. Lucia, walk around, I always see the whole landscape and everything else, even the people walking, the man with his khaki dog, through the eyes of Walcott. Walcott helped me to see my St. Lucia. And a quick story, years ago, I was in Barbados and in a room with some friends one evening having some old talks and drinks and so, and Kamau Brathwaite was there. And Kamau said, you know, when he came back from Africa, came first to St. Lucia for a year as extramural tutor, then he went to Jamaica. He said when he came to write about the Caribbean, wherever he turned, he found Derek. He found Derek Walcott. Interesting. Kamau said wherever he turned to, whatever he wrote about, Derek had been there before him. And for me as a St. Lucian poet, Derek has helped me to see and to look at very closely St. Lucia, the people, the landscape, the sea, of course, and so on. And I try in my own poems to, as it were, learn from him and carry that forward in my own description, celebrating, as it were, St. Lucia and, of course, the Caribbean, whatever else I look at, but St. Lucia in view at this time.
Absolutely, Robert. You know, I was thinking his is a litany of praise.
Indeed.
It is a chant. It's a talisman against forgetting.
Yes.
Forgetting the beauty. And I was just thinking that in a time when modernity is changing so much of what we used to take for granted, at a time of lockdown even, where we forget to look to the hills and draw inspiration and courage from it.
Right.
Because these are dark days, but there is light. Nature reassures us of that. And so I thought it was interesting. I thought his relationship with language was interesting.
Yes,
Come back to me, my language,
yes,
because it's a much contested patois.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Which
that's right,
when we come to Catherine, the poem that Catherine is going to read, we're going to be looking also at how he makes creative use of that language. Right. And so I thought it was interesting, and I thought it would give us a lovely moment now for us to move to your own poem that you have chosen, because it works within that same celebratory genre.
Right, I will. And just before I go there, now the third part of St. Lucie is Iona, Maboya Valley. And the first part, Derek has written in his own version of St. Lucian Creole. And then there's a translation of it. And that's all in. So St. Lucie is a great poem for students to go find and really read closely. And now you've asked me to read one of my poems. I'm going to read a poem called Song and Symphony. And it had its beginnings in what I call ekphrastic poetry. And these poems were inspired by the art of a St. Lucian poet, St. Lucian artist called Shalon Fadlin. And I wrote poems, a cycle of poems to her art. It's a cycle she had called a symphony, poems, symphonies. But let me read for you from Song and Symphony. It's published in my new book, Pierrot, but I'm reading from the original version. And you can see on the screen one of Shalon Fadlin's art, which is the cover of the pamphlet. But this is the second movement of Song and Symphony. The chastening chords of dark passages, the discordant notes, the end of prostrate purging interludes of sorrow, and after, with patient hand, here you are, you've waited, our days turned around and over, yesterday, tomorrow, brief, certain now, and I remember, do you? Across the valley, the viola's echo, and that epiphanic evening of the garden rainbow, when we knew us in love's unambiguous light. Oh, don't say you have forgotten that promise of Paradiso. The beatific heart of the matter of, yes, my faithful love, love. The beatific heart of the matter of, yes, my faithful love, love. In the meantime, the blessed declining ordinary, a broom cellar at the corner, karaoke bar above the grocery, raisin bread and custards from Coral Street for your tea, measuring medications, nodding over the evening news, settling our backs into our corners. Can this make a song? A certain melody drawn from your old guitar, this companionship soft, aromatic as aging incense, these remembrances, that persistent chord coming through the hibiscus hedge, that persistent chord coming through the hibiscus hedge like a Patrick Saint-Éloi tender mazouk. Come, shake the legs free of this age, its idolatry of death, crutches of belly aching, damp numbing noise without living rhythm, paralysis of those who limp with crippling pride in the dark. Come, a last close rub-a-dub to bass and drum, heart near to heart, breast to lifting breast, and oh, we've kept it all, we've kept the time. Now let us go in, leave the dark garden. Now let us go in, leave the dark garden to the coralita, crotons and fragrance of spider lilies, guavas and golden apples somewhere in their shadows. Again, I hear the distant orchestra's echo, strings and horns, a solo cantor, and do you hear our name in the song? Come the threshold of night, we shall meet ourselves in love, without ambiguous twilight, coupled, a singular, familiar, embraced at doorways in light of rainbows, separate and particular, and leave behind forever the sliver season of the moon. The sliver season of the moon has come round again over the hill quarter of Monnier. From Grand Riviere, the avenue climbs through blossoming Lent, yellow avocado, golden browning menorahs of mango, the exuberant lavender of glory cedar. Below the roofs and branches, fluorescent Corinth and Marisol edge the evening ocean. Your love returns, certain as the luna's phasing of its age, as the pulsing of hearts and petals, as the approaching bulk of hill grows itself a dark wedge against the sliver season of the moon. Song and Symphony, second movement.
Thank you so much, Robert.
You're welcome.
Students, I'm hoping that you had already received the poem. You had your own copy, you had marked it up nicely, because now what I want you to do, I want to do something, and for some of you, you might be familiar with it. It's called Write and then you will share. So I just want you in the next 3 minutes to write down for me all the visual imagery that you can note. Now, I'm hoping that by now you know what is visual imagery. And because I know that you live in an age where everything is Googled, you can Google it now. So you can Google auditory and visual imagery, and you can start making the list. So you have a little time to do that. And as you're doing that, I have assigned you to breakout rooms, and I'm hoping that you are familiar with it. So it will give you a notice saying that you've been assigned to the room and you will join the room. You will stay in the room for 15 minutes. I will send a notice when it's time for you to come out of the room. I will broadcast that 1 minute before. And then you will come out of the room, back to the main room. You would have chosen one person to share what the group came up with, because I've given you the question. You have your prompt. And so because you will not, once you're in the breakout room, you will not see the question. So that is part of why I don't want to, I will share the question on the screen now, but you have your question already. Okay, so for your first thing you're doing now is that you will, okay, so your first thing you're doing is that you're going to write. Okay, we're looking at images of celebration. Okay, and then I'm going to open the rooms, and when you are ready, you will go to your rooms that I have assigned you to. You have, so you, even if there is an invitation, you don't have to join yet. Faith, Faith Edmond, I'm going to assign you now. Okay. So I think, so anytime you are ready, teachers, I have not assigned you. And I am hoping that while the students are in the room, we can have a little chat. Now for the public, this is where they will pose whatever questions they have in reaction to what they have heard. So this is what will happen. So students, you write down, even if you don't write it down now and you do it in the room, that's okay. Because I want to make sure that the room works. Okay? So at this point, you can join your rooms. I think they've all joined. So now, I'm going, Robert and Kath. Let me look at the chat.
I'm here, yes.
Okay, that's okay. That's not a problem. I am going to make you and Catherine co-hosts. In fact, I'm going to make all of you teachers, everybody co-hosts, and you can just go to any room that you want.
Okay.
Okay. So what you will do is
Are the rooms in front of us celebrating
I will show
resilience?
you just now, Robert. You will
Okay,
see
sorry,
it.
no problem.
So let me get back to my participant list. And I am going to So Robert, you will now see the rooms and you can just go and join any room you want. You can just pop in. You just click on it.
Click on breakout
join.
rooms, right? Okay, click on breakout
Okay.
rooms. Great. Okay.
Danny, I'm doing the same for you, okay? Just so that you can maneuver.
And join any room. Okay, fine.
Any room that you want, just so that you can hear part of the conversation.
Okay.
And you can also.
And
Gloria. And Shanette, hi, Gloria. Hi, Shanette. Okay, so now.
Hello, and welcome to the Walcott House Museum. Today we will take you on a virtual tour of the Walcott House Museum on number 17 Chaussee Road, Castries. Walcott House Museum is the childhood home of Derek Walcott, the 1992 Nobel laureate for literature, and his twin brother, acclaimed playwright Roderick Walcott. The brothers were raised in the house with their older sister Pamela by their mother, Alex Walcott. Their father, Warwick Walcott, passed away in 1931, a year after the birth of the twins. The Walcott's childhood home is a replica of timber structures typical during the 1920s. Walcott House was originally a modest one-story timber townhouse located on Upper Chaussee Road in Castries. A small entrance portico leads into a porch enclosed by jalousies in keeping with the Creole-style external shaded veranda. The original house accommodated 2 bedrooms, 1 drawing room, 1 dining room, 1 sewing room, and a small back porch overlooking a courtyard with an external kitchen. A dogleg staircase from the original building, adorned with the turned wooden posts, flanks the south wall. The original house had a combination of the steeped pitch roof, typical of local vernacular, and a Dutch gable. In the current reconstruction, the Dutch roof was extended fully over the floor plan. It reflected the extraordinary features of wooden houses built in the 1920s and provided the perfect backdrop for the story of the Walcott brothers' childhood in the town of Castries. You might note the Mako balcony where members of the Arts Guild would meet and their creative ideas flourished. The yard where the Turks band made its carnival costumes. And this window where Sir Derek and Roderick Walcott dreamed. After it was sold, the house went through significant modifications to accommodate the first printery in St. Lucia, the lithograph.
Hi, good evening once again, everyone. We are experiencing some technical challenges, I believe. So our technicians have been in and out of the room, but I will now ask Kevin to go ahead and continue the video of the tour of the Walcott House so that the audience can continue to view it, please. Thank you.
Dutch roof was extended fully over the floor plan. It reflected the extraordinary features of wooden houses built in the 1920s and provided the perfect backdrop for the story of the Walcott brothers' childhood in the town of Castries. You might note the Mako balcony where members of the Arts Guild would meet and their creative ideas flourished. The yard where the Turks band made its carnival costumes. And this window where Sir Derek and Roderick Walcott dreamed. After it was sold, the house went through significant modifications to accommodate the first printery in St. Lucia, the lithographic press. Sir Derek describes the experience of visiting the home several years later. Our house, with its bougainvillea trellises, the front porch gone, was a printery. In its noise, I was led up the cramped stair to its offices. I saw the small window near which we slept as boys, how close the roof was. The heat of the galvanize. A desk in my mother's room. Not that bed, sunlit with its rose quilt, where we were forbidden to sit. The house boasts traditional details such as the fretwork and hurricane shutters. Its Dutch roof is flanked by 6 dormers. Its wooden staircase lined by original balustrades. Its open rafters, Dutch roof, rabbet and springboarding, shutters, fretwork, and awning windows all contribute to its charm. The original house was made of bois laurier. The Walcott house took on the original color scheme that Sir Derek remembered as a child. Mama's sewing machine, a singer, pedaled and stitched the house's human freight, and a great cannon tree there lit every scene down Chaussee Road. For those who have been, my eyes' windows brim as I unlock the gate. Now 8 watercolor paintings by Sir Derek Walcott are exhibited on the ground floor with manuscripts and playbills from Roderick Walcott, OBE. We will hear more about these in part 2 of the Walcott House Museum virtual tour. Thank you for watching part 1 of the Walcott House Museum virtual tour. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, consider sharing it with your friends. And if you would like to visit, please contact us on 452-3639. Become a member of the St. Lucia National Trust.
Wonderful. I trust that you enjoyed that tour as we now await Dr. McDonald as well as the others, as well as the students. They will be returning to the main room.
Yes, Sigifani, I have done the countdown has started and they are going to be returning to the main room now. Even if they're not finished, it's okay, because what I'm hoping is that as the groups begin to speak, the other students are going to use the reaction button and they're going to participate. So in 20 seconds, They will all return from their rooms and we are going to resume. It was as usual, I enjoy listening to the video on the Walcott Museum. I look forward to having the pleasure one day of seeing it. Okay, and now the breakout rooms have closed. Okay, everybody. All right. Is everyone with me?
Yes, we're back
Okay,
together.
so
Get lost. Okay.
Group 1, would you like to go first? Group 1 is going first. I mean, I don't know why I'm doing this. Group 1, would you like to go first? Story. Group 1, are we ready? Can Group 1 hear me? Is anyone hearing me?
I'm hearing you. Okay.
Right,
Yes,
you're hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Robbie, did you were with Group 1? Did somebody
I think Group 1,
identify
Caleb.
someone to speak?
I think either Caleb or Ayana, one of them were going to. Ayana still.
Ayana, are you ready?
Or Caleb. I'm not sure who decided who was going to go.
Okay.
Miss, can you hear me?
Yes, Ayana, I can hear you.
Can both Caleb and myself present?
Of course.
Okay.
Wonderful, great.
So the first visual imagery that we have is dark passages.
Okay.
We have that underneath transformation. And we notice that in the poem, the theme switches from light to dark, and it kind of goes back and forth between the two. We also have the epiphany of the garden rainbow, and we have that underneath light imagery. Also, we have Paradiso, and we notice that Paradiso is a work by Dante Alighieri, and it speaks of like Dante going through hell and eventually making his way up to heaven, which is like from light to dark. So we noted that. And we also have imagery of Caribbean foods like raisin bread, custard. We noted that it was kind of like a homely thing, taking stuff from the bakery to bring home. So that we have under transformation as well. Caleb, you'd like to go?
Yes, no problem.
Okay.
So first off, the poem was really good. I really enjoyed reading the poem. The imagery really complemented it, I must say. But in keeping with the whole themes we have today, like resilience, adaptation, and transformation, like the poem step by step brought you to like a point where it was very like resilient, and then there was adaptation, sorry, and then transformation was like happening all over the place, like a very recurring theme.
So, Caleb, when you say it was happening all over the place, can you give me an example?
An example.
Okay. Can I maybe pause and say, because in a lot of ways, we are preparing for us to do either the Unit 1 or the Unit 2 exam, Cape Literatures in English exam. It's always important when you're answering the question to go back and use an example from the poem or from the text that you're using to buttress your argument. Okay?
Miss, I understand, but the thing is that I didn't get a chance to write everything I wanted to. So
okay,
really...
That's fine, Caleb. So what will happen, I'm just saying it not only for you, but for the other students, okay? So when you are doing that, I would like you to do that, okay? So just a little reminder.
Okay, Miss.
This is a very good start. Excellent start, Group 1. So Caleb, I can come back to you and Ayana, but let me go to Group 2 now. Group 2? Who in Group 2 is going to speak? You can use the reaction to raise your hand, or you could just begin speaking. Or I'll just call on somebody. Group 2? Did you select someone? Group 2 had the 2 keys years. You were in room 2. Are you ready? What about justice?
Yes, it is.
Okay, are you ready?
Something so.
Okay,
We didn't
start.
have
This is
enough
a
time to
question now.
speak.
Go on.
Okay, so what we got, like Group 1 stated about the first line in the poem, where talking about the chords of the dark passages. I saw it as visual imagery because I could have imagined the dark passage, and we spoke about, because we didn't have time to speak about much, we spoke about the transitions. I think Group 1 also said that, where in one in a paragraph above he would speak about love and what he enjoyed doing and the arts, and then in another stanza he would speak about the living in the dark gardens, and like we can see, like, I don't know if it's contrast, but we can see the different transitions throughout the poems. And also when he spoke of when he described the silver season of the moon, and he described the bread, and he described the places, specifically Coral Street and Granville Avenue, we could have seen exactly what he was talking about. So so there is a lot of visual imagery and auditory imagery when he describes the music and the arts and the stuff he did to keep himself, I don't know if it's to prevent himself from reminiscing on the dark part of his life, but he used the arts to celebrate humanity rather than to dwell on the dark passages and the dark gardens and such. That's all we are.
That I know, just as you said, you didn't have a lot of time, but you made nice inroads into the question. So the auditory images that you have identified, are they celebrating? Are they celebratory? Did y'all get to that part?
We didn't get to that part, but I think when he was playing the drums and let me see if I can get it right here. When he was playing the drums and
You mean the part of alas, close, rubber dub to bass and drum? That part
yes,
here?
and can make this song. Yes, that part,
Okay.
and also the last stanza on page 2 when he say, "Can this make a song, a certain melody drawn from your old guitar?" So like you can get the sense of, like, I guess some of us know what an old guitar sounds like. So it ties everything together for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Okay. Well said. Group 3, room 3. Are we ready? Now, I just want to congratulate all of you, because it's not a lot of time that you have to unpack a poem. It's a long poem. It's dense with its imagery. It's densely packed with metaphors and images. And for you to tease out what you have done so far, that's really a good start. Group 3? Should I be calling somebody, or will group 3 go ahead and not let me call them? Okay. Group 3, Naomi. Can you hear me, Naomi?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good girl.
We didn't have much time, but somebody from the group made a point that the fruits brought us an imagery of him celebrating what the country appreciates and what the country has.
Which fruit?
The fruits in
just the fruit. Just the fruit
guavas
alone.
and golden apples. Where he, beg your pardon?
A specific fruit or just fruit in general?
The fruits in general.
Okay. And what kind of imagery did you all see it as?
Visual imagery.
Okay. So like the avocado, the yellow avocado?
No, like the guavas.
Sorry, the golden brown menorahs, the yellow avocado.
Yes.
Okay. That was my cue for the room. Okay, that's a good start. Anything else y'all came up with, Naomi?
When the poet spoke about Carroll Street, we saw that he was reminiscing about the features of the town, and him speaking about some songs as if it was therapeutic for him.
Okay, sounds like what?
The sounds, when he said a certain melody drawn from your old guitar.
Yes. Go on.
That's all we have so far.
That's all you have so far.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm hoping that more will come to you when you look at the poem again, because it's your poem now. You have you have it, and you can just go back to it. And so when it comes in the exam, you will be able to make sense of it. That was just teasing you, eh? It was not coming in the exam. So group 4, Ruth. I know that Ruth is talking a lot in that group, right, Ruth? And then I will, if not, then Shakima Ismond will be a perfect person to ask. Okay. Did y'all identify a leader for this group? Did y'all identify someone to speak? I know that Catherine was in that group, so I know that Catherine would have said to y'all, yes, you must identify someone. So go ahead. Catherine, did they?
No, but we had strong participation from Rakan, and I think Tyler was following along. So I'm hoping that one of them.
Okay, so then it could be a team effort. So one can start, and the next person picks up the baton, and they continue. This would be excellent. So
we came up with the line yellow avocado, golden brown in menorahs of mango, the exuberant lavender of glory cedar, and we discussed the word menorahs. These are candles, and these are you use candles in like parties, birthday parties. You wouldn't use it at like a funeral. So in itself, it's a celebration. And we also said that the word exuberant alluded to something big, something grand, and something grand would reinforce the idea of celebrations. So yeah.
that's a good start. And you pass the baton now over to? Who is going to speak now? So I am going to now put Mr. Lee on the spot. And I'm going to, when I read the poem, I see that the images all work towards this end, this celebration, the same celebration that I saw in St. Lucie. I see it in that poem also, the celebration of the people, the celebration of landscape. And when I say landscape, I don't just mean physical landscape, the natural landscape, but I also mean the social landscape. And we get a sense of an island and the sense of a joy of being part of this. And so I was hoping that Ms. Eileen now, Robert, you can talk a little about that celebratory aspect as it's made manifest in the imagery, the visual and the auditory imagery, just to tie it back so that I can move on to Catherine.
Okay. Well, remember, as I listened to the students giving their responses, remember the title of the poem is Song and Symphony. So the very imagery of song and symphony, and the art was to which the poems were written was a symphony series. So you'll find a lot of musical imagery in the poem, even when he speaks of the persistent, the chastening chords of dark passages, discordant notes. Those are musical images, even though they can be seen otherwise. But yes, the poem is celebratory in the sense I was saying to the group I was in. It's in a sense it describes a relationship almost and very early part one, movement one, almost like a marriage, and it go through all the joy and so on of discovering each other. But you come to some dark, discordant passages. You come to some bad times, and there's a dark drop down, as it were. But the second movement takes you up to the point where you end up with Paradiso and all the images of light and light of rainbows and so on. So certainly it is a celebration in a sense of a relationship, and again inspired by the art of a relationship which is going through different kinds of changes, the uncertainties, the resilience of relationships, how you eventually come out. Little domestic scenes, you know, the custard bought from Coral Street, having some tea, playing a tune on the guitar. You know, it's a domestic situation, and the word love occurs a lot, the word light occurs a lot. So it is definitely celebratory in that sense, celebrating, if you want, in the midst of a landscape, quite right, Antonia. And it is a St. Lucian poem set in St. Lucian landscape. In the St. Lucian landscape, a couple celebrating their landscape, their life, the images around them, the fruit, the fauna, the flora, the music, the zouk music, you know, Patrick Saint-Éloi. It is celebratory, even become very gritty to rub-a-dub, you know, it's time for a last rub-a-dub. So again, what I'm saying in the poem, it is, I'm a Caribbean person, I'm St. Lucian, I have St. Lucian imagery, but I'm also Caribbean, drawing my images, but there are other ideas in there in terms of human relationships, going through difficult times, coming out of it, celebration. It's also a poem of faith. You know, I'm a Christian poet, so my own faith, as it were, interweaves into the poetry, maybe not directly in your face, but the very fact that people rise up to a paradiso and eventually succeed, as it were, with their life is an element of faith, because it's the images there of entering paradiso in the light of rainbows. We arrive together. I'm just throwing these out very generally, students can read again, but all these images and the content are contained in that poem, which draws, celebrating my own St. Lucian landscape, the menorahs of mango blossoms. I've often watched mango blossoms, and they're like, you know, the Jewish menorahs are candlesticks with light. So I'm drawing on all those images out of my own landscape. It is the Caribbean view, if you want, of you know, Christian poetry in that very quote unquote sense, of poems of faith, a certain spiritual view of things in the midst of the integrity of our life. Just to kind of sum it up. But I think
Absolutely.
the students will put their fingers on some things, you know?
And in fact, I was looking at, in fact, you talked about the relationship,
yes.
You know, and the celebration of that relationship, the longevity of it, them growing old together.
Right.
And for me, it was a kind of resilience, that endurance, which of course now brings me that notion of resilience. It brings me now to Catherine and the poem that she's going to read.
Right.
Catherine, over to you, and then we'll have a conversation on that.
Certainly. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll be reading from the second movement of The Acacia Trees by Derek Walcott from his collection, White Egrets. Bossman, if you look in those bush there, you'll find a whole set of passport, wallet, ID, credit card that is no use to them. It's money on their mind. And it's not every time you find them afterwards. You just leave your bag with these things on the sand, and faster than wind, they jump out of the bush while you're there swimming and rubbing tanning lotion. And when you find out, it's no good to send to the special unit. They done reach Massad. But I not in that. Not me. I just make a little change selling and blowing conch shells. It's sad. It is true. Them faster than any vehicle. And I self never get in any commotion except with the waves. And soon all that will be lost. It's too much tourists and too little employment. How about a little life there? Thanks. But boss, don't let what I say spoil your enjoyment.
Yeah, and what is remarkable about that poem, guys, from White Egret, is that it's the only poem that's written in the vernacular. That poem there. And so I really enjoy it. I like the entire poem. Catherine, tell me why you chose not to read the entire thing, but just to read the second part.
Well, I mean, there was some practical constraints, but also that particular section I felt was very current, extremely relevant, and I thought accessible to our participants. And for me, this piece kind of exemplifies a lot of what Walcott is doing in a really sort of concise way. So for me, Walcott was always elevating and celebrating the vernacular in both the sense of the language and in terms of the visual, the imagery of St. Lucia and the Caribbean, and like holding it up to the light for us to examine. And so this is revolutionary in my experience of poetry hitherto encountering Walcott, that the things that were worthy of our attention were the images of the acacia trees that are very, very, very accessible and normal to me. And then also the register of the language that he's using and holding up the English Creole and saying, this has beauty, this has rhythm, this is poetic. So that largely informed why I was selecting it. But then also in terms of the content, with Walcott, the personal and the political are very often sort of entwined. And I found that this poem really brought together those things, because there's a sense of the speaker really having this conflict with the new, well, in the previous part of this poem, the new plantations, the developments and so on that were creating some kind of tension in the society. And here is this speaker in the vernacular reporting his experience of it. And I found that really powerful. And I found it was a commentary on the alternatives of the conflict that comes with this, this sense of trying to make a way in a society that has maybe privileged the experience of the visiting, the tourist, etc. But also at the seat of this, for me, this poem captured Walcott's own conflict, his internal conflict, because the you in the poem, like that you go for a swim and you rub tanning lotion, can be interpreted both as the plural you, anybody who goes to the beach, but it's also Walcott is at the beach, taking a swim and rubbing tanning lotion. So there's a kind of sense of where is he in this poem? He's straddling both the experience of the outsider and the other, as well as the indigenous. And it's almost like the speaker, he interprets it as a sort of accusation, I feel. So I found like this poem really spoke to that sense of Walcott straddling his belonging and his otherness. So for me, that was really powerful. And then also, even though he uses the vernacular, there's a stamp of Walcottian language there, or Walcottian imagery, that I found so exciting. And that line comes from, I don't get involved in any commotion. I don't make any commotion except with the waves. And so we have a little departure from the cadence, so that and there's a little insertion of his stamp, of his sort of his register there. So for many reasons, this 14-line poem is so compact and so rich, and you can do so much unpacking with it. So that was why I selected it. And I haven't even, skimmed the surface of the things that it's doing. There's so much at work in this piece.
I agree with you. In fact, what I thought was interesting, look at how he plays with, he uses the Creole, the change, la vie. How about a little life here? Look at how he's playing with that. So he does that there. But it's also interesting because here is this man also hustling the tourists,
Yes.
And at the end, don't let what I say spoil your enjoyment. But it has already spoiled the enjoyment, both for Walcott, the persona, and for us, the wannabe tourists, because in a lot of white egrets, that lamentation against the despoiling of the land that tourism is bringing, where we have acres of land being cut down, especially in this one and the guy is saying too much tourists, but too little employment, So I thought it was really an interesting paradox that was being developed there. And we will see that taken up, I think, in a poem a little later on, Sea Change. He does pick it up again there. So that is a paradox that's running throughout. So it was interesting, I thought, to make the link, therefore, between the poem that you're going to do now, Thomas, and then we can talk a little about that. So now I would invite you to read that poem.
All right, then. So this is called Thomas, after the storm, the hurricane. Its absence is what framed its immensity. When at last the winds, as if suddenly shamed, stopped, and in the void, a heavy, wet silence. Everywhere, everything bore the marks of a misused lover. Trees made obsequious by fear, bruised landscapes, silent tears and swollen limbs, rivers unable to contain their woes. After the betrayal, the quiet pain of disbelief. The people emerge from their caves and corners to walk the night's cacophony with their eyes and give thanks for answered bathroom floor petitions. Thomas 2, or Requiem. In the void of unknowing, our worst fears reside, so we light candles and make noises. We name things as if naming can contain the terror. I baptize you, Thomas, biblical and benign. The images emerge and hang heavily in fortunate living rooms. Everywhere are new ancient paths, swathed by a giant, we baptized God. Thomas 3. Sunday morning feels like Genesis. Out of the silence, a heron's call signals safety, and day's first overture begins. A disorientated hummingbird throws itself against the pane of sunlight pasted with leaves, and then, stunned against its nature, is still. First movement. The sweep of bass broom through water, swish, swish, the twist of towels turned out over buckets, pour, dribble, drip over the banister and out the door, the scrape of leaves from windows. Cutlass-bearing, bare-backed men in rubber boots are stripped of labels like at Carnival, but this is coup de main. The ringing crack of freedom from fallen trees and branches, and the lines of separation that Thomas came to mock. La la, la 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 la. Second movement, roadside grilled meat crackles and hisses, and warm rum coaxes 1,000 stories of survival. Man triumphs against nature. Though rivers have reclaimed ancient paths and north is amputated from south, none dare break the code of bravado to say what they all know. I lost God, but last night he came and found me. Third movement. Save for a flickering orange hue, the transistor hums into the darkest night. Valerie Albert Favory's voice keeps rhythm. Yes, caller, beat, crackle, hiss. I from Fosse Jacques, but I live in Castries. Since yesterday I calling, but up to now I can't reach my mother. Beat, crackle, hiss. Caller, what's your name and what's your mother's name? Beat, crackle, hiss. My mother named Marguerite, my name is Christine. Beat, crackle, hiss. Christine, I'm sure your mother is listening and is glad to know you are safe. Beat, crackle, hiss. Well, we still have no word from the South. Do not take that for anything. The authorities are working hard to restore power and communication. Finale. Wary but resistant, like children past their bedtime, Valerie's goodnight is permission to give up the watch. With heavy limbs and eyes, at the most honest time of day, I lost God, but last night he came and found me.
Thank you, Catherine. Now, I think it makes for a wonderful transition from the acacia tree to here, because in the first, in that poem, we're talking about man trying to overcome nature. And here it's like nature now is reacting and is a force to be reckoned with. So now, guys, you got your poem. And of course, I'm hoping that you had read it before and that you had made some sense of it. I am not expecting that you will get everything from it in that first reading, or even when I put you in the breakout rooms. And while I had thought I would have changed the breakout rooms, this time I'm going to keep you in the same room because you've developed a relationship. And I'm hoping that you can just build on that. You're comfortable with each other. And so now you're going to discuss how, in the poem, Atkinson captures the resilience of human beings as they cope with this disaster. So I want you to look at 3 examples of resilience and discuss as a group how her use of diction and symbolism helped to highlight the theme of resilience. So again, I'm going to open the rooms. You're going to go into your rooms and you're going to discuss it. And this time I'm going to give you 12 minutes to discuss it. My co-host, as usual, I'm hoping that you will join the rooms and help to give some guidance. So I'm opening the rooms now. Please join. Zoe?
Homeros, Book 1, Chapter 1. This is how one sunrise we cut down them canoes. He looked at smiles for the tourists who tried taking his soul with their cameras. Once wind bring the news to the Laurier Canal, their leaves start shaking the minute the axe of sunlight hit the cedars, because they could see the axes in our own eyes. Wind lift the ferns. They sound like the sea that feed us fishermen all our life. And the ferns nodded, yes, the trees have to die. So fists jam in our jacket, cause the heights was cold and our breath making feathers like the mist, we passed the run. When it came back, it gave us the spirit to turn into murderers. I lift up the axe and pray for strength in my hands to wound the first cedar. Dew was filling my eyes, but I fire one more white rum. Then we advance. For some extra silver under a sea almond, he shows them a scar made by a rusted anchor, rolling one trouser leg up with the rising moan of a conch. It has puckered like the corolla of the sea urchin. He does not explain its cure. It have some things, he smiles, worth more than $1. He has left it to a garrulous waterfall to pour out his secret down La Saucière, since the tall laurels fell, for the ground dove's mating call to pass on its note to the blue tacit mountains, whose talkative brooks, carrying it to the sea, turn into idle pools where the clear minnows shoot, and an egret stalks the reeds with one rusted cry, as it stabs and stabs the mud with one lifting foot. Then silence is sawn in half by a dragonfly, as eels sign their names along the clear bottom sand. When the sunrise brightens the river's memory, and waves of huge ferns are nodding to the sea's sound. Although smoke forgets the earth from which it ascends, and nettles guard the holes where the laurels were killed, an iguana hears the axes, clouding each lens over its lost name, when the hunched island was called Iguanalao, is found. But taking its own time, the iguana will scale the rigging of vines in a year. Elbows akimbo, its deliberate tail moving with the island. The slit pods of its eyes ripened in a pause that lasted for centuries, that arose with the Arawak's and a shark with sidewise jaw sent the chips flying like mackerel over water into trembling weeds. Now they cut off the saw, still hot and shaking, to examine the wound it had made. They scraped off its gangrenous moss, then ripped the wound clear of the net of vines that still bound it to this earth and nodded. The generator whipped back to its work, and the chips flew much faster as the shark's teeth gnawed evenly. They covered their eyes from the splintering nest. Now over the pastures of bananas the island lifted its horns. Sunrise trickled down its valleys, blood splashed on the cedars, and the grove flooded with the light of sacrifice. A gommier was cracking, its leaves enormous tarpaulin with the ridge pole gone. The creaking sound made the fishermen leap back as the angling mast leant slowly towards the troughs of ferns. Then the ground shuddered under the feet in waves. Then the waves passed. Achille looked up at the silently healing with the foam of a cloud like a breaker. Then he saw the swift crossing the cloud surf, a small thing, waves of blue hills. A thorn vine gripped his tree. Around it, other ships were shaping from the saw. With his cutlass, he made a swift sign of the cross, his thumb touching his lips while the height rang with axes. He swayed back the blade and hacked the limbs from the dead god, knot after knot, wrenching the severed veins from the trunk as he prayed, "Tree, you can be a canoe, or else you cannot." The bearded elders endured the decimation of their tribe without uttering a syllable of that language they had uttered as one nation. The speech taught their saplings, from the towering babble of the cedar to green vowels of bois campêche. The bois flow held its tongue with the laurier cannelle. The red-skinned logwood endured the thorns in its flesh, while the arawak's patois crackled in the smell of a resinous bonfire that turned the leaves brown with curling tongues, then ash, and their language was lost. Like barbarians striding columns they have brought down, the fishermen shouted. The gods were down at last. Like pygmies, they hacked the trunks of wrinkled giants for paddles and oars. They were working with the same concentration as an army of fire ants. But vexed by the smoke for defaming their forest, blow darts of mosquitoes kept needling Achilles' trunk. He frotted white rum on both forearms that at least those he flattened to asterisks would die drunk. They went for his eyes. They circled them with attacks that made him weep blindly. Then the host retreated to high bamboo, like the archers of Arawaks running from the muskets of cracking logs, routed by the fire's banner and the remorseless axe hacking the branches. The men bound the big logs first with new hemp, and, like ants, trundled them to a cliff to plunge through tall nettles. The logs gathered that thirst for the sea which their own vined bodies were born with. Now the trunks, in eagerness to become canoes, plowed into breakers of bushes, making raw holes of boulders, feeling not death inside them, but use, to roof the sea, to be hulls. Then, on the beach, coals were set in their hollows that were chipped with an adze. A flatbed truck had carried their rope-bound bodies. The charcoal smoldering cored the dugouts for days till heat widened the wood enough for ribbed gunnels. Under his tapping chisel, Achille felt their hollows exhaling to touch the sea, lunging towards the haze of bird-printed islets, the beaks of their potted boughs. Then everything fit. The pirogues crouched in the sand like hounds with sprigs in their teeth. The priest sprinkled them with a bell, then he made the swift sign. When he smiled at Achille's canoe, in God we troust, Achille said, "Leave it, is God's spelling and mine." After Mass one sunrise, the canoes entered the troughs of the surpliced shallows, and their nodding prows agreed with the waves to forget their lives as trees. One would serve Hector, and another Achilles. Achille peed in the dark, then bolted the half-door shut. To the fish pot with the crab of one hand. In the hole under the hut, he hid the cinder block step. As he never raced street past sleep-tight houses, under the sodium bars of street lamps, to the dry asphalt scraped by sparks of separate stars. Banana fronds nodded to the undulating anger of roosters, their cries screeching like red chalk drawing hills on a board. Like his teacher, waiting, the surf kept chafing at his deliberate walk. By the time they met at the wall of the concrete shed, the morning star had stepped back, hating the odor of nets and fish guts. The light was hard overhead, and there was a horizon. He put the net by the door of the depot, then washed his hands in its basin. The surf did not raise its voice. Even the ribbed hounds around the canoes were quiet. A flask of l'absinthe was passed by the fishermen, who made smacking sounds and shook at the bitter bark from which it was brewed. This was the light that Achille was happiest in, when, before their hands gripped the gunwales, they stood for the sea width to enter them, feeling their day begin.
The saltfish bleeds brine and softens overnight. The next morning, you rise to rinse and remember you dreamed of rain. At the sink, you scrape the scales, silver in the white March sun. They stick to your hands like sweethearts. A rasping wind carries the counsel of the mangroves up the valley. You finger through the swollen flesh, feeling for the line of the bone, the ridges like prayer beads. Flake along the grain of the fish into a bowl, expectant as the parched earth. Hands oiled, you score the fig from aft to fore, slip your thumb through the seam to peel the stubborn green casing from the starch. You put it to boil, sweep the sweat from your head. The pan on the fire is fragrant with coconut oil, onion, peppers, and thyme salvaged from the Kawem grudged yard. Fry the fish and serve with fig and cucumber seasoned with cruel vinegar. You sit, eat. Bougainvillea dances at your window. You pray for rain.
You know, I've never heard anyone speak about saltfish the way Catherine did. Imagery, the use of the metaphors, and how she describes it is amazing.
Yes, it reminds me of Accra. Good Friday, bake Accra. And you know, I have no idea how to make Accra.
Really? You do not know how to make Accra?
Not a clue.
Well, let me show you.
Let's take in our final performance by Catherine Atkinson.
There were Sunday mornings when a sea bath felt like a second chance, and conversation with my grandpa, a Christian rite, a path through genealogy to redemption. The Nubian princess and the captain, the missionary, planter, duke, and slave, outposted outcasts, all charged for some sin of misstep or color deemed just as grave. Amnesiac faith in Wesleyan Dunn is part of my inheritance. But still, I'm haunted by Shango's invocation, which from October thunders through the hills. It calls me home to a different truth that isn't explained by my grandpa's proof. Its absence is what framed its immensity. When at last the winds, as if suddenly shamed, stopped, and in the void, a heavy, wet silence. Everywhere, everything bore the marks of a misused lover. Trees made obsequious by fear, bruised landscapes, silent tears and swollen limbs, rivers unable to contain their woes. After the betrayal, the quiet pain of disbelief. The people emerged from their caves and corners to walk the night's cacophony with their eyes and give thanks for answered bathroom floor petitions. In the void of unknowing, our worst fears reside. So we light candles and make noises. We name things as if naming can contain the terror. I baptize you, Thomas, biblical and benign. The images emerge and hang heavily in fortunate living rooms. Everywhere are new ancient paths swathed by a giant we baptized God. Sunday morning feels like Genesis. Out of the silence, a heron's call signals safety, and day's first overture begins. A disorientated hummingbird throws itself against a pane of sunlight pasted with leaves, and then, stunned against its nature, is still. First movement. The sweep of the bass broom through water, swish, swish, the twist of towels turned out over buckets, pour, dribble, drip, over the banister and out the door, the scrape of leaves from windows. Cutlass-bearing, bare-backed men in rubber boots are stripped of labels, like at Carnival, but this is Kudme. The ringing crack of freedom from fallen trees and branches, and the lines of separation that Thomas came to mock.
Welcome back, everybody. I know that you had a lively discussion in your rooms. And I know that I told group 2 that they were going to go first because that was my favorite group, right, group 2? So this is when you start. And I know group 2 selected somebody. So let's start. I know it'll be soon your time for your bedtime. And I know we went a little over, but remember we started late. So let's have people reporting. We'll go 2, then 4, then 1, then 3. Room 2, then room. Okay, ready?
Good night, everybody. Okay, so from discussing with my group members, we found that in the line, the people emerged from their caves and corners. It was symbolic of the resilience. Why? We saw that the caves and corners were symbolic of, they represented the shelters and various materials that the people used in order to shelter away from the storm, so that they did not allow the storm to affect them that much. They kept on believing that the storm would be over, and they had hope that it would be over. And also in the line, the first movement, when you were discussing with so that the first movement would be the first action taken after Thomas. So in the line, the sweep of bass broom through water, swish, swish, the twist of towers turn out over buckets. Though Thomas was a very impactful natural disaster on St. Lucia, they did not give up, they did not stay and weep and have no hope and think that St. Lucia would not be able to pick up from this disaster. They all came together and did as little as they could, whether it was take out a branch that fell on the road, to fix up somebody's home, give food, places that flooded. As you know, backsliders flood a lot, so they swept off the river, they swept off the flooded roads, any houses, and the lines of separation. From that line, the lines of separation that Thomas came to mock. Thomas coming to mock the country is like, how should I say that? Thomas came to, I stuck on that one, but what I wanted to say was
no, don't worry. You have made an excellent start. Perhaps someone else, the other Kezia in your group, can help you. But if not, we can go to another group and then you can put your hands up and then we can take you. But I like this point you're making about lines of separation. So if you can tease it out a little more, and then you can work on Thomas came to mock and what he was mocking. So this is a really good start. So I'm going to move to 4 and then I'll come back to you. Group
okay,
4?
thank you.
No problem. Group 4.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Tyler.
I will begin and the rest of the group members will jump in after me.
Absolutely.
So one line that stood out was the people, cutlass bearing, barebacked men in rubber boots are stripped of labels like at Carnival, but this is Kudme. So from these lines, I understood that instead of persons staying down after Thomas and in their own corners, they decided to come together and probably clean up the roads and clear the gutters of the debris and stuff. So this really spoke to their resilience because it shows how strong persons can be even when they have lost most of their livelihood. And like the image of the kudme, like for me, I could have seen exactly what the people were doing because it was easy to visualize kudme. That's all from me. Somebody else will continue.
Tyler, before you go, and because you are right there, what do you make of this line, the ringing crack of freedom from fallen trees, of freedom from fallen trees and branches? What do you think the ringing crack is? And anybody in your group can help you, because you were there, but that's why I just wanted to ask you because you were right there. Anyone want to raise their hands and do that? Tyler, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you can think about it and then later on we can come back to you. Anybody else from Tyler's group who wants to go now, or should I go to group 1? Okay. Group 1? Now, in the interest of time, we're not going to repeat what others have said. We just bring what is new, bring it to the table.
Can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So in the line, the transistor hums into the darkest night. It showed resilience to me because they were resisting the communication limits. They used the radio to connect to everyone, even though the poles were probably affected. And to me, it symbolizes hope that they were able to find something to connect with each other, people they probably lost in Thomas, and to find out if they were okay, I guess. So that's what I found.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Anybody else in your group wanted to say something?
Miss, I want to talk about the final stanza where it says, "Weary but resistant, like children past their bedtime, Valerie's good night is permission to give up the watch." The use of diction shows resilience because although they are scared and afraid, the people are holding on. They're afraid this fear, they're fighting this fear in order to stay in touch with what is going on in their country, and they do not let go until the show ends. And this indicates that the show might be their only source of information during the disaster.
Yeah, I like that, Shakima. What do you make of that line and the repetition of that refrain? I lost God, but last night he came and find me.
Miss, I believe it's saying that since people are pulling away from God, they believe that the disaster is God's way of saying that I am here and I'm coming back to reclaim my people, to reclaim my land.
Okay. So we're going to thank you very much, Shakima. Thank you very much, group 1, group 3.
That wasn't group 1, eh?
Oh, was that? That wasn't group 1. That was group
Miss,
4.
that was group 4.
Okay, still group 4. Okay. So can I have someone from group 1 then? Group 4, you got all of this praise.
Miss, I'll go and then I'll hand it over to Jovi and the rest of them.
Okay.
So we said quite a lot. I will end with what Riken just said about people drifting from God. We identified that before the storm, before the disaster, people were kind of, caught up in modernization, caught up in their daily affairs, and then it took the disaster to kind of tear them apart and bring them together and bring them to the realization that, you know, God is still there. And it also restored their sense of community. We see that the disaster brought them back together. They were involved in the Kudme. We also said that it was a very relatable poem for us because we lived through that. And Caleb said that it actually brought back memories of Thomas for him. We also identified that there was real life allusion to Valerie Fevrier from DBS. Also, we have that there was separation between the North and the South, and it showed that there was, like, the North was more developed than the South because there was connection there. And then in the South, they said the South was amputated from the North. And then they said, like, in the North, there was connection and people were trying to reach their family members. Also, I found it interesting that the poet likened the disaster to God. And to me, the magnitude of that shows, like, it really took that much to bring people back together, to restore the sense of community. Like, people were that drifted away from each other, they were that detached from each other, there was no sense of community, and it really took that big of a thing to bring them back together. Caleb, you want to add? Anybody else want to step in?
Well, you basically summed up everything we had.
It was an excellent summation.
Nice. I must say it was very nice, Miss. But
Miss,
I
can
just
I
have
ask?
one thing to say. Oh, sorry.
You can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Oh, what I have to say, I like the line of the stripping of labels when you were stripped of their labels, just like Carnival. Because in Carnival, you could see the Prime Minister jumping up, you could see somebody by the roadside jumping up. So Carnival has no face, no position, no like officiality. It's just anybody and everybody. So the coup may basically, like, the disaster had to bring everybody together, regardless of status and position. Everybody that's doing the work to just uplift the nation from the tragedy. And yes, it was very relatable because the 183,000 people that we have in St. Lucia, like, a lot of us went through Hurricane Thomas. And so whilst we're reading, like, we almost, it's very nostalgic because we just like relive our Thomas experience because people who are at their homes, people who were working, it was just a very trying experience, and we showed like much resilience to get over Thomas in the poem and in real life.
Excellently said. There's another person in the group who wanted to say something.
Abigail.
Abigail,
Yes,
you want to?
miss.
Yes, Abby.
The first line in the second movement, roadside, grilled meat crackles and hisses, and warm rum coaxes, well, 1,000 stories of survival, man triumphs against nature. I found that very interesting, the way the poet infuses our culture in that line to show our resilience as a people. We know that St. Lucians, they love their rum, they love a good time. And so we realized that even in the midst of a disaster and seeing the impact that Thomas had on the country, on the landscape, on nature, people still found time to kind of self-indulge and soothe themselves in these practices that we know bring comfort and can bring some joy in a difficult time. So I really like that line.
Well said. Group 3. I know that the others have done a lot of exegesis. They've pulled out a lot, but I'm sure that you can find something to say. I was thinking, who's going to speak in group 3? Should I call somebody, or you're just going to? Kezia will come back to you just now, okay? Let me get somebody from group 3.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Okay, so one example of resilience that my group came up with was in Thomas 3, Sunday morning feels like Genesis. Out of the silence, a heron's call signals safety, and day's first overture begins. This is an example of biblical illusion, and by the use of the book Genesis, it reminds us of the story of Noah, who after a storm saw light and hope for the people who were affected. Though the storm caused many damages and instilled fear into the people, they were able to come out of it safely, and it's thankful that God spared their lives. And that means that after the storm, there is a new beginning, and people come together to form this resilience against nature, despite the damages made and ancient paths recovered.
Excellent.
So the use of this biblical illusion, it symbolizes hope. After a storm, it symbolizes hope.
I got to fly the plane. You let me fly the plane. I did figure eights and
Okay,
everything.
well done, well done. Okay, so I think we were supposed to come back to Kezia. Kezia, your hand was up a while ago. Are you ready?
Yes, Miss. Miss, okay, earlier you asked Tyler a question. You asked her, the ringing crack of freedom from the fallen trees and branches. You ask her what does it like the line mean or whatever, Miss. So what I was thinking is like, okay, so during the storm, we'll have like trees falling and branches falling down. So I was feeling like these branches, like they are symbolic of the person surviving the storm. Because after the storm has now subsided, there is now new life to be made. So it shows like the persons have survived like a terror. It can also be added that it's symbolic of like like new life. I was saying, just like the branches will grow back. So it shows like the persons will have to rebuild a nation and reconstruct it back to normal. That's what I wanted to say, Miss. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very nice too. And even the noise that the cutlass would make against the tree is part of the ringing, that sound. But also by clearing the road, by clearing the branches away, you are freeing yourself from the debris. So it's working on a lot of different levels. I don't know how many of you saw that, there's a lot of juxtaposition. We have a lot of images of the brutality of what has happened, the damage, the deterioration was like amputation. So when I talk diction, you need to be looking at those kinds of words, and then how it's balanced against other images of endurance, of hope. Ruth, your hand was up. Yes, Ruth.
Good night.
Good night, Ruth.
In terms of what the last participant said, I agree with what she said. I agree with what she said, but I also interpreted the statement, the ringing crack of freedom from fallen trees and branches, in two ways. To me, it either symbolized the end of the storm, so the general just end of the terrible things that were happening to everyone. And it also, since they said the ringing crack of freedom, I feel like it may also symbolize the disorientation of people from like their normal lives, because everyone's lives were just abruptly stopped. Like everything was stopped by the storm, and it wasn't something we were particularly expecting. So everything was in a disarray, and because of that, we had to reform, like what the last participant said. We had to reform and regroup and rethink things and think of things like in a different perspective, because everything was different after the storm. And in terms of resilience, we might see it as freedom, because maybe like what we had done before was archaic. Maybe it wasn't the best things we were doing. Maybe what we were doing was chaotic, and because we had to rethink it because there was no other solution. Everything's better now, at least a little bit.
Yeah, so and you can also link resilience, that notion of you freeing yourself from the despair of the moment. That's where resilience is coming. So that's the freedom to dream, the freedom to hope for another day, another, as you say, it's a brighter tomorrow. And you have all the images of Genesis, the biblical images suggesting transformation. So you'll see how all the themes are coming together. You have adaptation to this new reality, you have resilience, and you have transformation. But I will are there any other comments before I give the poet the last word on this one?
Miss,
Any other? Yes,
I
Callum?
have a question for the author.
Okay, question to you, Mr. Poet. Go on,
Um,
Callum.
Were you trying to interrogate the difference between, well, the separation between the North and the South in the poem? Because I see the word amputated, and through like the conversation, we get a feel like the South is in like disarray because people from the North are on this radio station and they're speaking to each other. And then the woman says that she can't reach her mother. And her mother is from Fort Jacques because she's from Fort Jacques herself, but she lives in Castries. So we see like the differences between the North and the South. And then again, it's like further like reiterated that while we still have no wood from the South, like it's as if the North is developed and it's working properly. And also, I missed something very crucial. Also, the lines, well, the line, though rivers have reclaimed ancient paths. So in a hurricane, like there are many old rivers that are just not connecting anymore. But because of like the hurricanes, winds and the rains, like old paths just get back to normal because like it pushes the debris away. So the paths are coming together. However, the north is amputated from the south. So like that's like a contrast to see. So were you trying to deliberately compare and contrast?
I'm sorry, I couldn't see who's speaking. Could you identify yourself?
That was Callum.
Callum, thank you,
It's
Callum,
Caleb.
for your
Caleb,
observation.
sorry, Caleb. Caleb.
Okay.
Thank you, Caleb, for your observation and for your question. And wow, you sort of underscored some things that might have been at work subconsciously. I can't say that I was making a conscious effort to interrogate the division between North and South and the contrast of development and underdevelopment or developing. But when you frame it like that, it certainly makes it more apparent. Yes, it was a very deliberate attempt to the very deliberate word choice in terms of amputation, in terms of separation, etc. But whether I don't think I was making any conscious commentary on the South being sort of less connected than the North. I really appreciated your observation about the new paths being created, and I think I was consciously looking for some resonance there in terms of the return to Kudmer, which is something that is a bit of a lost art, especially in the North.
And Mrs. Ancient,
Yeah, sorry.
use the word ancient, and the Kupme is something that's kind of ancient.
Yes. So that was a little bit more deliberate. But just because I didn't consciously make that decision doesn't mean that it isn't there, Caleb. And so thank you for observing it and reflecting it back to me as a writer. Sometimes there are things that we carry in ourselves that we aren't always consciously articulating, but are communicated to the reader. And I can see that is there, that because that awareness is definitely there in me. Does that answer you at all?
Yes, Miss, very much so. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
Students, you are very lucky that you're doing a poem. You did 2 poems and you had poets standing by to help you to unpack it, to unravel it, to unmask it, so to speak. So that was really fortuitous for you because I don't suspect that although both Lorna Goodison and Mark McWatt are poets who are still alive, you may be able to interface with them maybe on Zoom now, but definitely it's not something where you get to really meet the poet. So I am hoping that you have, and I think you have, by the way, just from your own interaction, I think you've enjoyed this meeting of the poet, this embracing of poet and poem. The fact that it is 9:22 and you are still, I think there's a lot of meat left in you. There is, you're not eager to go, I would say, but I know that I am going to have to bring this to a close. So I thought it would be a wonderful way to do, I want to do three things. I want to ask one of the teachers to raise a vote of thanks to our two excellent facilitators and poets. So Gloria, Jani, Vita, or Shanette, I would really like if you could do that. That's one. And then I will have Catherine and Robert respond. And then Daisy will do the final closing. Jovi, your hand is up, yes? Sorry, I just saw it. Jovi?
I wanted to comment on Mr. Lee's poem.
Okay, go ahead.
My interpretation of it was one of more based on like someone coming home from having migrated to overseas.
Oh.
And my celebratory image was their welcome back home, where they probably will walk, they stopped through Castries and then they were welcome by the bread and so forth on Coral Street. And
how is the
so,
bread a welcome? How is the custard, the bread and the things on Coral Street a welcome, Jovi? I like that point very much.
Because probably one as a child would have the habit of going there to buy bread and pastries and stuff. So it's kind of a warm remembrance from transitioning from darkness to the garden rainbow.
Yes.
So it's kind of like nurturing to them.
Okay.
So that was kind of my interpretation of it.
That's a nice intervention, Jovi. Well said. Okay, teachers? It would be nice. I think we should finish at 9:30 so that I know you don't have to go to bed, but I think we need to bring it to a close. The teachers, who is going to volunteer to do the vote of thanks on behalf of the students and teachers? Okay. Can I call on somebody?
Okay, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Please say anything. I just wanted to, I just want to say thank you on behalf of teachers and students. Thank you to the Patricia Ismond Fund for doing this again one more year. We're happy that it actually happened. Considering the current dispensation that we're under with all this online learning and everything having to be on Zoom and Google Meet and all of that. So we're really thankful for that. Thankful for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting us. We thank you, Dr. McDonald, for facilitating as always and always being such a gracious host. We thank you for that. We thank Catherine Atkinson and Mr. Robert Lee for taking the time out to actually spend time with us, spend time with our students, and offering their assistance and their explanations regarding the poems that we looked at this evening. And we just want to say thank you, honestly, for the opportunity, as always, every year. We appreciate the assistance that we get from you in terms of helping us prepare our students for their CAPE exams. So we are grateful and we look forward to what's going to happen next year. So from all of us at SALTC, from everyone in the Vieux Fort, at the Vieux Fort Secondary School, we just want to say thank you and we look forward to what's going to happen next year.
Thank you, Jani. Thank you. Thank you. Catherine, closing words?
Well, thank you. I'll just reiterate, it's been a real privilege to be part of this, this event and this process. Thank you to UE Open Campus, the Patricia Ismond Fund, to you, Dr. McDonald, and my co-presenter, Mr. Robert Lee. But a very special thanks to you, students. Writing is often such a solitary endeavor, at least the writing of poetry is. And you're never quite sure who your writing is reaching. And so it was such a pleasure to be able to interact with a readership. And I learned so much in this process, especially about how much that we communicate unconsciously as writers. And it was really a delight to see the light of your intelligence, your inquisitiveness, your curiosity, and to see what all your heads together were able to create like an interpretation, a story. So thank you for allowing me to be part of that.
Thank you, Catherine. Robert?
Thank you, Dr. McDonald and Open Campus and the Pat Ismond Fund for inviting me to this year. I was very happy to be here. It's great to interact with these students. And as Catherine said, to hear the insights. We write the poems, we put them out there, but just to get the response, especially of younger readers, is always gratifying. And it certainly helps us to say, hey, you know, that's possible. I hadn't really thought about that angle. So I want to thank the students with whom we interacted this evening. And thank you all for inviting Catherine and myself to be with you all tonight. So I wish you all the best as you study more. Keep reading St. Lucian literature, Caribbean literature. Maybe one or two of you may be writers. If you want to be a good writer, just keep reading and reading and reading and thinking about things like this and how you dig into literature, whether prose or poetry. And I wish you all the best. So thanks a lot once again.
Thank you, Robert. And students, I want to encourage you. I listened to you tonight as you were giving voice to your thoughts. And I know that we complain that it's a lonely process now. We are separated from each other, but you are at home with technology. And today, in a lot of ways, you can create little groups for yourselves. You can set up your own little Zoom meetings where you discuss your ideas, you discuss your poems. You can take a poem from the selected ones that you are given and you thrash it out and you talk about it. Because as you articulate your ideas orally, you're going to become a better writer of these ideas. Right. And I mean, because I noticed how as the evening progressed, you warmed up to it, you got accustomed and you came alive. And I thought to myself, you know, we may be locked down, but we're not locked out. We're not locked out of community. We're not locked out of these engagements. So I thank you very much. I think, as Robert said, for me, it is always a pleasure. And it is the pleasure of interacting with you, of seeing how you're thinking, and maybe thinking that I too might help to give a little spark to you. So let your light shine. Have a good night and God bless you. Over to you, Daisy.
Facilitator, Dr. McDonald Smythe. Poets for the evening, Ms. Catherine Atkinson and Mr. John Robert Lee. Our participants, who are the students and teachers, friends of the UE Open Campus St. Lucia, our audience, good night. No duty is more important than that of returning thanks. So on behalf of the UE Open Campus, I take this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks to every individual who has directly or indirectly contributed to the success of this Patricia Ismond literary workshop titled Unmasking Poetry. First, I wish to thank Ms. Hester Ismond for her continued support of this initiative and that keeps the memory of her dear late sister, Dr. Patricia Ismond, alive and inspires future generations of St. Lucian literature scholars and poets. Next, I thank profusely the facilitator, Dr. Antonia McDonald Smythe, for bringing her expertise as a professor of literature and as an examiner for CXC Cape Literatures in English to assist students in using those skills that they have been learning to be able to tackle the examinations critically. Also for her willingness to assist without hesitation despite her busy schedule. The sub-theme given by Dr. McDonald-Smythe for this evening session is very fitting and applicable to our own lives as we continue to unmask our own celebratory power through our resilience and adaptation in the face of this uncertain and transformative period. To the Cape Literatures in English students who took the time to register, participate, and engage in this lively discussion, as well as those students who would have liked to participate but could not due to technological and other challenges, I say a hearty thank you. I enjoyed your exuberance and trust that you will be able to apply and transfer the skills and insights that you gained tonight to your studies and writings to help you maintain your interest in the subject and to continue to build new connections and experiences in your appreciation of the world and your pursuits of excellence. I extend a hearty thank you. I extend, a special thank you to the Cape Literatures I extend a special thank you to the Cape Literatures in English teachers for mobilizing and encouraging students to attend the session and for their participation in this session as well. Your efforts are greatly appreciated. To the poets, Ms. Catherine Atkinson and Mr. John Robert Lee, thank you so much for wholeheartedly sharing your inspirational works with the students and the audience and assisting in this educational activity that extended a new direction or aspect to the workshop and allowed students to connect one-on-one with local poets. Your added discourse enriched this evening's proceedings. We say thank you and give credit to the St. Lucia National Trust and the Cultural Development Foundation, specifically Voices from the Underground, for their permissions for use of the relevant video contents that help to boost this session for our public audience. To the Nobel Laureate Planning Committee, I say thank you for allowing the university to continue to contribute, to the Nobel Laureate Festival activities and for your assistance with promotion of the event. I wish to recognize and heartily thank my colleagues from the university's technical and marketing departments, namely Mr. David Foster, Mr. Patrick Johnson, and Mr. Kevin George for assisting us with the live stream of this event and other behind the scenes technical and other guidance. Thank you to the acting head and staff of the UWI Open Campus St. Lucia for your dedication and support in preparing for this workshop, which celebrates our Nobel laureates. Last but not least, thank you so much to our virtual public audience for attending and participating in tonight's events. To anyone I may have forgotten to mention, thank you so much for being an important part of the success of this event. Before I end, I just want to invite you to the Poets and Writers Studio International Reading Online Series and Festival, scheduled to take place on Saturday, 13 February 2021 from 11 a.m. EST USA time, which will feature our very own poet, John Robert Lee, alongside other poets, Catherine Hankler, Jennifer Rathburn, and Dick Lurie. So I just want to say, continue to stay well and safe during this trying time. I wish you all a very good night, divine light and blessings.
Thank you very much, Daisy.
Thank you, Daisy.
Everybody. My heart is feeling full now, so I will not speak too much longer. I wish all of you a good night. Stay safe, stay in place.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Bye and good night.
Thank you, Segatani. Until we meet
Thank
again.
you. Good
Bye-bye,
night.
everybody. Good
Yes,
night.
indeed. Bye.